in that. All right, guys, we got to move on because I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, ah. So I'm going to start talking faster and moving on a little bit quicker, but keep your questions and don't forget them. We'll have that time at the end. I'm going to give us time for Q&A. So hang on to them. If I don't answer them or we don't have time to answer them here, save them for the end. We'll have this whole board. We can come back and revisit them as we go to the Q&A. All right. Next up, we have discovered what do we want to talk about. I've given you some tools to probe and say, what is the thing that we as a team feel like we should talk about? Grab that 1, 2, maybe 3 items, bring it into the next section, generate insights. This is Gadget with his magnifying glass saying, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. We need to understand what is causing this. So ask the team, all right, let's take the top one that you guys talked about, this thing, whatever thing is, and say, let's start digging into this. Where did this come from? What happened to it? Why is this here? Begin digging in to the data and the causes. So one great way of doing that, some of you may recognize this concept, is called the 5 whys. I'll go ahead and zoom in on this. The 5 whys is just that easy. You pick your first thing. Okay, so team, you said that when the manager came in and talked to you, he yelled at you, and then he gave you extra work, and that really messed things up, right? Why? And then they'll tell you, here's why that was a problem. And then you just keep asking why. The example I have here, the problem, users don't use the search feature. So you ask why. Hey, why don't they use the search feature? Well, they don't use the search feature because they don't know that they can. Okay, why don't they know that they can? Because they're not interested in the feature. Oh, well, then why are they not interested in the feature? Because they don't. And so follow me. I'm not going to go through all these, but you just keep asking why. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Until you get down to the point where you say, you know what, we've gotten to a root that we might be able to do something about. What often happens is teams say, the manager came in and yelled at us. That's a problem. Okay, let's go tell the boss's boss to tell that manager not to come in and yell at us. Maybe it's that simple, but often it's not. Often there's something buried a few layers down. And if you just take the first thing that someone says is a problem and go wielding an axe trying to cut down trees, you're going to find yourself in a bad situation. So spend the time, this is what the retrospective's for, and dig in, understand what the data is telling you. Understand what's possible. What can we do to maybe solve this? And don't just take the first answer. Spend some time, create space, allow some silence, allow the team to think, what would I do if I had the opportunity to improve our relationship with our manager? What would I do if I was trying to make sure that our code reviews got done in time? What would I do if I was trying to ... right? So give some time for people to think what's possible and to dream about their ideal future. Another way of breaking down, hey, what is it that we can do here is called the Fishbone Diagram. I don't know if you've seen this. Fishbone, you can Google it. You put your problem here at the beginning, and then you say each of these spines that come out from the fishbone is an area, right? So our problem is our code didn't deploy. What was involved in the code not deploying? Well, one thing was the DevOps team messed up. What else? One thing was we failed a bunch of tests. What else? Well, we got our code in late. What else? Well, and so you look at these things and you break down the causes. Why are we doing this? Why are we digging in and trying to peel apart the data that we found in the previous level? The reason is because we want to get, remember a successful retrospective, we want to get an experiment that we can take back and we could try. So this is the point where you're getting the team to start digging and handling and playing with the problem, to understand it, to truly realize what it means, so that you can create an experiment. Those of you who remember hypotheses and experiments from school, right? We hypothesize by doing a thing that we will solve this problem, right? Clearly articulate what the problem is, which will have these benefits. We think this will get better as measured by this measurement. Have the team work on that and say, okay, what could we do to maybe address this challenge, right? So the code didn't deploy. We had the Fishbone Diagram. We had the 5 whys. What can we do to maybe affect that? And let's come up with an experiment that we could maybe try based on this data. So now you're actually asking the team to not just think, but to think creatively to come up with a solution that they can apply to this problem. So I would spend about, if I was using, let's just say an hour, right? I had an hour, 60 minutes. I would spend my first 10 on the icebreaker. I would probably spend 15 on gathering data. And then I would spend 15 on this next one, trying to dig into it and generating insights. Gathering data and generating insights are the meat of your retrospective. They are where the thinking happens. They are where the talking happens. They are where creative ideas flow. So 5 whys, fishbone, and hypotheses and experiment. Again, I will pause just for a second to look at the chat and see if there's any questions I could quickly ask. The whys would annoy my team. I've been there. Yes, make sure you explain to them why you're doing the whys. Otherwise, it can get annoying. Miss having teams that talk, teams that don't talk. It's easy to just say, they just won't talk. We as facilitators need to find ways to make them talk. And what I would recommend, if you have a team that will not talk, you can't get meat out of them, spend most of your time on the icebreaker and the close. Why do I say that? Because the icebreaker is safe. I can talk about if I like cats over dogs, no problem. Get your team to talk about things that are safe, and then begin to segue that into things that may be more dangerous. Nobody wants to go into a retrospective and feel like they just lost their job because they said something that's going to get them fired. Talking about cats and dogs probably shouldn't get them fired. If they disagree with the CEO of your company, cats over dogs, probably not going to get them fired. So start with safe topics and then try to move them into more real topics. It is okay to use a few of your first retrospectives to try to build up that psychological safety in the team. It's a good investment for you. Do you have an export this data maybe into a Word doc? Oh, how do you export this data? So totally all about how you're capturing it, right? If it's on a whiteboard, what I would do is I would take a picture of the whiteboard in person. If it's in a tool, if it's in Miro, I would just download the PDF. If it was in Word doc, like if we were all editing a Word doc together, you can just download that. Make sure, however you're capturing this information, especially generate insights and gathering data, make sure you have some way of exporting that so that you can go back and revisit it later. Again, this is the meat of the retrospective, what you're taking out. All right, what if gathering data doesn't lead to the obvious issues you need to talk about? I have a question. Obvious to who? So yes, the team may be distracted, right, by the manager came in and yelled at me, and you might be saying, we can't do anything about the manager. We need to focus on the code quality. Be very careful as a facilitator, agile coach, scrum master, in pointing the team where you think they should go. Now, I'll tell you as a scrum master, I definitely moved teams in a direction, but I did it, if you think with like guardrails. And if the team feels like, hey, there's something over here that's interesting, and I'm like, no, there's something over here, allow the team some of that flexibility because they will support way more a decision that they feel like they came up with than one that you came up with. If I came into a retrospective and we had 100 people in the retro, I said, all right, retrospective time, your problem is that you are not showing up for lunch on time. And that's the end of the retro. What are you going to do to fix not showing up for lunch on time? This is not going to be a productive retro. It's not even going to be a conversation. So be very careful in how you guide the team. Again, it's okay for you to provide guide rails, but don't feel like, well, the team is talking about this, but I think this is the issue. If you've done gathering data and generating insights correctly, for some reason, something about what the team wants to talk about is resonating with them. Now, can you do anything about it? I'm about to talk about that in my next section. We'll talk about that as a separate thing. But I would say let your team have a little bit of freedom to explore the things they feel like is holding them back and see what results come from that. So be very careful about putting your own expectations. If the team just did this and this and this, they'd be fine. Allow the team to have some self-discovery in that space. So give them a bit of space for that. Great questions. I've got to move on. Save any extra questions you have as we go back.